In this spreadsheet, I have comments that were feedback to workshops and the date of those comments. And I put that information into AI and I had it code them, almost like a sentiment analysis, with whether or not the comment was negative, positive, or neutral, and what topic that comment showed. It took several goes to get this because you have to put it in pieces, but I was able to get this coding. And now I want to delve into it with spreadsheet tools to see, what topics are coming up, what kind of overall sentiments are. The first thing we'll do is take a look at a pivot table. And I'll notice that there are several topics that appear multiple times. And with a pivot table, I can take all of those topics and kind of pivot it down and count up how many times that appears. Let's take a look at how. So when I create a pivot table, I'm going to start by selecting the original data, and that's columns A, B, C, and D. And then I'm going to go to Insert and choose Pivot Table. For this, I want to put it right in the same sheet I'm working in, so I'll choose Existing Sheet, and then I'm going to click in F1 to select that, and click on Create to add my pivot table there. I'm going to shrink these columns a little bit so I can see where I'm working. And scroll over, and the way a pivot table works is I have rows, columns, and values, and the rows are going to be, if I go back to my picture here, that's going to be the word that I want to aggregate around. So I want to see how many times content accuracy comes up, for example. So I am going to choose for rows the topic. And I'll do that by, on the right hand side in Pivot Table Editor, for rows, I'll click Add and I'm going to choose Topic. And what that does is it picks every unique topic that appears in my original data and lists each one once. The next thing I want to do is I want to count up those sentiments. So how many times do the sentiments appear? So in values, I'm going to click on Add and I'm going to choose Sentiment. By default, it's choosing Summarize by Count A, and this is what I'm going to want to choose here. Count A you use whenever your original data has words, text. You would choose count if the original data had numbers. You'll see if I choose count, it goes to 0 because my original data is words. I need to choose count A like it originally did. All right, so if I expand this out, I have a count of each time the sentiment appears for each topic. So I know general comes a lot of times. I know we have several instances for mentioning the topic of staff, but were these positive, negative, or what? In order to break that out, I'm going to add sentiment as a column. So for columns, I'm going to choose add, and I'll choose sentiment again. And now across the top, I'll have each of the different sentiments. And there's also one marked suggestion, and now account for each of those sentiments. So I know how many times general had that topic had a negative comment. So this is cool and all. I can look at this as an overview and see in general, we have a lot of positive comments. When I look at staff, for example, there's only positive things. But if I want to look into maybe areas to improve here, I could take a look at the negative and maybe I want to find out when people mention the content accuracy in negative. So there's this really great way to go from this numeric value, this aggregate count, back to the original data that connects to it. And all I need to do is click on a value in my pivot table. So for example, the number 2 here. And when I say value, that would be an aggregate, a sum, a count, an average. So when I click on that, it's actually going to create a new tab for me where I can see all the information that connect to this value in the spreadsheet. So sentiment, negative, topic, content accuracy. Someone said I didn't learn anything. So this is a great way to drill down on those individual points in the pivot table. If I don't want this sheet, I could have clicked delete on the little tool that appeared in the bottom left, or I can click on the drop down next to the name and click on delete there to get rid of that. Now, it would be really helpful if instead of just opening this up and seeing the comment, if I could also see what session that comment was about. Now with AI, I couldn't put too much data in, so I didn't put the session name into my original data. However, I have another sheet that has each comment and the session that it came from as well. So I can use a formula called Vlookup to bring the information here, comment and session, and combine it to the information I got from the AI analysis So to do that, I'm going to add in a few columns here. So I'm going to select a few columns, right click and choose insert columns to the right. So I have some space, and I'm at a column for the session name here, and then we'll create a VLOOKUP formula. So in this new column I created, I'm going to say equals VLOOKUP. And the VLOOKUP formula has 4 parameters. The first one's the search key. That's what am I looking for. And if I go back to the data where I have this, I have comment and session. So I am going to look up this comment to find a match. So that's search key. My range is where am I looking for that? So I'm going to make a comma, so I'm going to my range, and now I'm going to click down into this other sheet, and I'm going to select columns A and B. And it should populate that for me. Now, a quick note, VLOOKUP only works if the thing I'm looking for, that was the comment, if it's in the leftmost column of the range. And in this case it is, so that will work fine. Now I'm going to make a comma, and the third parameter is the index, and that's what do I want to return? Which column from the range I'm looking in. So in this case, I want to return the second column where I have the session name. I'm going to close this hint so you can see. So I want to return not the first, but the second column in the range. So that would be 2. I'll make comma 2. And now I'm on the last parameter, which is going to be whether or not my range is sorted. And in this case, and in most cases, you want to say false, even if it is sorted, because if you say true, then it's going to give you approximate results instead of just exact matches. I only want you to give me the session name when the comment exactly matches. So once I've completed all the 4 parameters of that, and you can take a look at the video in the description for more information about VLOOKUP, but you'll see I get a session name. So if I find this, no, I like the desktop over here, learning, it combines with Google Drive. Now the reason I'm not just copying this out and pasting it in is because I don't know if the order's the same. So VLOOKUP is going to make sure I don't get any mixes. So now I'm going to go ahead and copy this formula down so my entire column E has all the session names. I can do that a couple different ways, but I'm going to just double click on this circle in the bottom right corner of the cell, and it populated down the entire column of session names. All right, so now if I go to my pivot table, I'm going to edit it again, and I'm going to tell the pivot table I have more information in my original data so I can see more details when I drill in to a value on my sheet. So I'm going to click on edit in the bottom left of the pivot table, and up in the top of the pivot table editor is my original data range, and I want to actually do columns A through column E now, and I will do that and hit enter. And now I have that updated information. And when I come back into my value and double click and it opens up, now I actually can see the session that was connected to this negative feedback. So now I know I should probably rework that class. And these are all made up workshop titles, but this is the idea of what you could do with that. Another thing I might want to know is, okay, I want to quantify this. Instead of it just being positive, negative, I want to know, like, what's our score if I give a numeric value to this? And again, I could have AI do that all for me as well, but I found that I was getting inconsistent information as was, and this is something I can do really easily in a spreadsheet myself, so I will apply that here. Now I'm going to add a column for score. I could go down through, and whenever I see negative, I could manually type a -1. Whenever I see positive, I could type a 1. But I could use the VLOOKUP function to do this for me with one formula. First, I need to set up my values, like what I want everything to be equal to. I'm going to add a few more columns so that I have space to add this. And then I am going to pull all of the unique sentiment values, but with a unique formula. So in this new column, I'm going to say equals, and I'm going to type unique. And the unique is asking for basically one parameter. In this case, all we need to do is select column C, and I want every unique value that comes in column C. And it's showing me sentiment, negative, positive, suggestion, and neutral. And now what I can do is I'm going to assign a score to each of these. So negative, I want to be -1. Positive, I want to be +1 or 1. Suggestion, I'm going to leave blank. And neutral, I want to be 0. And now I can do the same thing I did before, a VLOOKUP formula to assign these scores to each row. So in the score column I made, I'm going to say equals Vlookup. My search key in this case is going to be the sentiment, so C2. The range I'm looking in is going to be this little table I added, so I'm going to highlight that table I just added. Let me open up my helper here. The index I want returned is the second column in this range, so not column H, but column I, so 2, and is sorted false. And when I hit enter, I will get a score for that row. Now, before I copy this down, I have to do something to my lookup range where I'm looking, because as I copy down, I don't want this purple section I'm looking in to slide down the sheet with me. So what I need to do is I need to fix the rows. I want it to always be H1 and always be through I5. And the way you fix something and you make it static is with a $sign. So before the 1, I'm going to put a $sign, and that means if I drag this formula, that number 1 will not change. If I also want that 5 to be static, I'll put a number sign before that 5, and I will be good. All right, so once I have that, those references are fixed, I can double click on the bottom of my current formula cell and my values are applied down. So if I spot check a few here, wherever I have suggestion, I should have an empty, and neutral is 0, etc., etc. So let's find out what our total score is if we look at all the values over time. The easiest way to do that is just to highlight column F. And in the bottom right hand corner, there is a quick numbers tool. And depending on what you've selected, you'll see different information here. But in this case, I've selected numbers. So it's going to give me information like a sum, minimum, maximum, count, average, things like that. And to find out what my average score would be, I would choose the average here. And that's going to give me the idea of what my overall score is. What if I want to see my score over time? Because I also have a comment date, I could actually block this out over time and even make a chart from it. Now, let's start off by making a pivot table with our date and our score. So I'm going to highlight my main data, go to Insert and choose Pivot Table. And again, I'm going to put it in my existing sheet. I'll slide over to the right of my other pivot table and click Create. And in this case, for rows, I want it actually to be the date. And then I want my value to be my score. And in this case, because each date might have more than one score, I don't want to count. In this case, I want an average. So I want the average score for any given date. Okay, now this is great, but because I don't have tons and tons of data, it's kind of spread out. So there's this really cool thing you can do with a pivot table, which is date grouping. So if I instead want to see just one average score for maybe every month of the year, I can do that with one click. I could also do it quarterly or by week. Depending on your data, you can do different things. To do that, I'm going to right click on a date in the rows area here. So when I right click on that, I'm going to go to Create Pivot Date Group. And I'm going to do the year month option. And once I do that, you'll see it aggregates everything even more. So any comments from March of 2023 are averaged together here, and etc. down the line. It looks like I have somewhere where maybe there was a suggestion playing into the role here. So if I want to filter out those empty values, I can do that with a filter. So if I come down here to the filters option and click on add, I want to filter any of my scores that are blank. So when I choose my showing all items, I'm going to uncheck blanks here, click OK, and now I've filtered out anything that is empty. Okay, so now that I have this data, it should be pretty easy to select the data and add a chart to see my kind of overall trend here. So I'm going to select the data. I'm not going to select the grand total. I don't want that in my chart. And then I'm going to either choose Insert Chart, or if I close out my pivot table editor, I will see the chart tool also in the toolbar toward the right. And it looks like by default I got pretty much the chart I want. I wanted to see my dates chronologically on the bottom and this line showing my trend for that average score over time. So with a few tools in the spreadsheet, I can really take this data and learn something from it, figure out maybe what sessions I want to modify, or to figure out what areas I'm doing really well in and we should keep doing well in. Pivot tables, the Vlookup formula to combine data and to automatically add values, they're all super helpful tools. Drilling into the data with the double click tool and grouping your data by date, all helpful tools. Take a look.